Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Fantasy Realms from WizKids. Fantasy Realms is a 2 to 6 player game which players are going to be building out the perfect hand by literally, well, just drawing cards. That's all you're going to do in this game. You're going to draw a card, discard a card, draw a card, discard a card, until there are eventually 10 cards in the center play area. When that happens, that will trigger endgame immediately, and then players will add up their cards and see who won. That's the entire game. There we go. You know how to play now. Genuinely, there's a few small things to go over, but that's basically the game. So in the game, you're going to have 7 cards. You're going to have these 7 cards over here. If you are playing with the expansion, you'll have an 8th card. Since I have the expansion cards mixed in over here, I'll go ahead and take those over here. Cards will have their value in the top left corner. That's going to be your hand value at the end of the game. If you end with this hand right here, ta-da, there you go. Let's go ahead and keep that. Now, my turn, I'm going to go ahead and draw a card. Now, I have a 4 over here, so why should I not immediately get rid of this 1, 2, or 3, which are obviously less than the 4? And the answer is because there's also abilities on the cards. There are going to be different numbers on the cards, as well as abilities. Usually, the higher the number, the more there's some sort of ability to compensate or trade off, or some risk-reward aspect going on in the game. So, for example, this one over here clears the penalty on all cards. That means every single card that has a penalty. That 35 over here is only so high because it has a penalty. It's blanked unless it's with an army, and it blanks any weather. Meaning if I have any weather cards in my hand, they'd be worth nothing, and this is worth nothing unless it has an army, and there are currently no armies in my hand. If I hold on to that artifact, well, I can ignore that penalty and keep that card, and there are a lot of other cards in the game that have high point values with penalties, so that 1 point artifact doesn't seem like a lot, but it may well be worth trying to work out and build towards a higher hand. That's the general premise of the game. You're not just working with a actual value in your hand, you're working with the actual abilities as well, to try to take into account what combination of all these abilities are going to pay off for you over here. So for example, right now we have the Gem of Order. This Gem of Order gives you points for having a run of cards. So I already, because of my hand over here, I already have a 1, 2, 3, 5, and I have a 4. Well, that's this hand over here is probably from somebody who played the Gem of Order last time, and I probably didn't shuffle this, because we already have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which the Gem of Order says it's going to be worth. How many points is that? The Gem of Order says that it is 150 points for a 7-card run, which probably should go with that, because that seems like that's a bunch of points right there. That's the basic premise of the game. You draw a card, you see how well it incorporates to your hand, then you go ahead and discard the card to a center pool when you're done with it. The next player goes and draws a card, they go ahead and discard a card, and this pool starts building, and the relevance of that is you can also draw cards from the center pool. So as the game starts, you're drawing cards from a blind deck, hoping to get what's best for you. As the game goes on, someone else's reject might be the thing that scores you a bunch of points, and so you're trying to build towards a hand size, a hand that scores as optimally as possible, based on the various cards you can see, and of course going in for the actual pool over there, and then trying to balance around when you think endgame is worth it ending, because you might want the game to keep going, but if you have a good enough hand, maybe push that endgame to drive endgame for everyone else who they may not yet be ready for that. They may try to be fishing for another turn or two to build out that perfect hand, to gather those 2 armies along with that king and along with the queen to be able to build out a nice combination of cards. But that's basically the game. I could keep trying to tell you things, but at this point you know everything you need to know to be able to play Fantasy Realms. Which I guess brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. I mean, literally the game is, here's 7 or 8 cards, draw, discard, build the best hand. The ease of play is pretty up there. As far as how long a game takes, games tend to run, I'd say, in the range of 15 to 25 minutes, but probably closer to that 15 to 20 as you play through it. It's fairly fast. Draw a card, discard a card, draw a card, discard a card. You can play it from 2 to 6 players. The more players you have, the more it'll slow down a bit, but ultimately it is a fast-moving filler game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, this game is just fun. That's ultimately what this game comes down to. You have a giant deck full of a ton of cards, which means a sheer variety of cards. The extra expansions, the expansion in this game over here, this is Fantasy Realms plus the Cursed Hoard expansion, so there are some extra factions mixed in. Those are nice fun little additions to the game. You have a lot of variety, you have an incredibly simple game, and just the satisfaction of building out a hand because of how many cards there are means every game feels different. As you go through this game, it's a very easy game to learn, it's a very easy game to play, it's a good filler game, and it always feels different because there's so many combinations of how these cards will fit together. You want those floods, but that flame is going to be in the mix. You don't want to blank the flame. You want the thing that's going to remove the blanks, the penalties. You want these cards to combine with those. You want those leaders and this specific one card, and the fact that you can go ahead and keep this card, which will let you end the game and hunt for another card. There's all these different ways things and abilities combine in a very simple, very straightforward experience that ultimately is quick playing and very satisfying when you get to the end and try to add up and see, did you get 120 points or did you get 275 points? You can get a lot of points points in this game, which makes it a very satisfying, just like, let's just push a little further as we try to score points in it. As far as what I don't like in the game, not a ton. It is a very light experience, factor that in. The decision making on this one is, I would say the decision making is not that present. It's more risk reward. Ultimately, you're trying to always choose between a bird in the hand or two in the bush. That's the only decision you're making, because otherwise it's just math. If you're just going with what's in your hand, it's always just math to figure out what's in your hand. So the only real decision is that push your luck aspect. Do I go for the safe bet, or do I try to go for that thing that might be a little more risky but could pay off if that card comes up? Which means the decision making arena is more about the fun of it than it is about any serious strong degree of decision making. I'll also say that some games can move very quickly and be a little less satisfying if no one's going for cards they want. Meaning inevitably, getting 10 cards in the middle, or 12 with the expansion, is just not a lot of cards in the middle, which means the game can end incredibly quickly. Sometimes people are going for other things, so as I put something down to the middle, that's good for you, you take that, and you put down something now, and I go ahead and take that. The more players you have, the more that middle is a contested area where players are putting things down and taking them from it, but if players don't want what's in the middle, the game can both be incredibly quick, which isn't a problem, but rather be incredibly not satisfying, which can be a problem. So that's the one thing I'd say. Some games are just like, oh, nothing's there, okay, great, here's your ending hand, and 3 cards changed from your starting hand. Not a lot really mixed up over there. That can happen as you go. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, a lot of it is math. I mentioned already that sometimes it just comes down to the math of what's in your hand. That is present in the game. If you don't want to be constantly adding and re-adding and thinking through, well, this could be worth more points than that, and these 2 cards with that, there's 10 from this and 10 from that, but it's also a base value of 35, but if I remove this, that's going to go there, but also if I discard that to the middle, the undead will pay off of that. There can be a lot of math in the game, which is not necessarily a huge problem, but if you don't like constantly doing a bit of mental gymnastics, or alternatively being okay with going with your gut, this may not be a game for you because that is present in the game. Additionally, a lot of it is luck. It doesn't bother me as much in a short game like this, but it's definitely true that sometimes, if you imagine going for that straight that I showed you, that gem of order, and you had a 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, drawing that 3 is hugely impactful. Sometimes it's about specific cards you want. This card combos with this card, or this card needs one of these 2 cards to work. And drawing into that, especially towards the end game, ultimately is a big part of luck in the game. There is going to be a decent amount of luck in here, along with the math aspect. It's very quick, it's very satisfying, but it's not a perfect game either, so you have to know if this is right for you. As far as final thoughts on Fantasy Realms, ultimately, I enjoy this one. Now, Fantasy Realms is actually the 3rd game in this line of games I've played. I played the original I played Red Rising for Stonemaier Games, which is based off Fantasy Realms. Then I played Marvel Remix, also from WizKids, which is much more based on Fantasy Realms, literally the exact same game, almost. And then finally, I played Fantasy Realms. And while Red Rising didn't work for me as much, I found that I really did enjoy Marvel Remix, and that's a game that I hesitantly gave it a 4 out of 5, wondering how long it would stay in my collection, because ultimately a game that's this light, sometimes they have a nice charm at the beginning, but that charm doesn't always last over time. What I can say is Marvel Remix and Fantasy Realms feel very similar, and so the charm and experience and enjoyment I get from Fantasy Realms is there, and I feel a bit more confident in it considering that Marvel Remix is still sticking around just fine. So ultimately, I guess what I'm saying is this is a 4 out of 5 for me. It's a 4 out of 5 that is, granted, lighter than, it's a lighter game than I typically give 4 out of 5s to, but I do enjoy how fast and easy it is to play, how enjoyable and variable the game is, and how much of a good filler game I find Fantasy Realms to be. Now, the caveat I'll give, because I haven't talked heavily about the expansion has 2 things to it. It has additional factions, which I love. I like having the additional card in my hand. It makes me feel like I can do more stuff. I like having the more cards in the middle till the game's over. Again, makes me feel like I can do more stuff. And then we have these cursed relics over here, or these cursed items that I think is a complete waste of space. I don't like the expansion. I don't like these cursed items at all. Like, I don't see myself ever playing with those again. Unless somebody specifically is like, hey, I really want to play with those expansion items. Maybe, but I didn't like the cursed items. I guess that's my review of the expansion. So, base game Fantasy Realms, great. Expansion I still recommend because I do like the additional item cards over here. The additional faction cards that get mixed in. But the cursed item expansion, I can't say I enjoy it. I find that ultimately they give you like these decisions that most of the time when we were playing with these decks over here, they basically give you these items that you can go ahead and either you use it and you lose those points, or you discard and get another one, or you just alternatively just, you know, I guess you can either hold on to it, discard and get another one, or you can use it and lose the points shown. Ultimately, I just found that most of the time when we played this, our group was just trading these in and never really utilizing them. I think this adds unnecessary decision space and not a lot of fun, at least for myself, to a game that I otherwise do enjoy and recommend. As far as other game recommendations, I kind of mentioned them already, but first of all, Marvel Remix and Red Rising. If you enjoyed Fantasy Realms, Marvel Remix is basically a Marvel reskin of the game with minor rules differences. Red Rising will take the core principle of Fantasy Realms and expand it to a larger game, which you may or may not enjoy. For me, I think that I like the core principle best at its simplest direct format. And then lastly, if you're looking for another game that forces you to consider a variety of scoring challenges with a limited amount of space, Siliconvania is going to be another point scoring optimization game. Very different things going on in it, but it's going to have that same element of you only have a limited number of ways to score points, and you try to figure your way around that, but that's a more interesting game baked around it, in my opinion. Actually, also, now that I think about it, that's also from WizKids, which I didn't think about, but that's also a WizKids game. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.